Hollywood is full of sad stories about the lives of stars who shine so brightly at the start of their careers and end in tragedy. Dorothy Dandridge is one of those sad stories. Without knowledge of her personal life, she might have seemed like one of the luckiest women in the world. A child from Cleveland who makes a name for herself at the Cotton Club and then gets chosen to be a Hollywood screen star. But Hollywood didn't know what to do with Dorothy. And Dorothy didn't know what to do with herself. Women as beautiful as Dorothy Dandridge were leading ladies and supposed to be able to share on-screen kisses with their leading men. Dorothy could kiss the black actors, but not the white ones. This conundrum made her practically unemployable. But in her real life, she could kiss black men and white men, and she did. And boy, oh boy, did she ever choose two bad actors to say, I do, to. One black, one white. This is not a story about race. This is a story about character and lack of character. Her first husband neglected and abandoned his child. Her second husband used her for her money. Which one is worse to you? Think about it as I present to you a tale of two husbands. It was nice to see the salute to dance history, but it definitely didn't come close to the brilliance of the Nicholas brothers. And just for the record, the Nicholas brothers filmed this entire exhausting and complicated routine all in one take. Quick side note, I know that many who are watching this video are too young to know the movie Stormy Weather. But if you know the Robert Townsend film The 5 Heartbeats, you have seen Harold Nicholas before. He portrayed Sarge, the choreographer for The 5 Heartbeats.
He's here to help us with the choreography.
Talking about Jim, I do the choreography, man.
The dresser, he's not here to take your place, man. He's here to just help out.
What can he teach me? Man, if you didn't like what I was doing, you could have come and talked to me. Instead of going behind my back, bringing in some old drunk...
Stop right there. Now don't let your mouth get you into something your ass can't get you out of.
Now, back to Stormy Weather. It is still known for its all-black ensemble cast, which was indeed a rarity during Hollywood's classical film era. Every black entertainer of that time wanted to be in on that film. Actors, musicians, composers, singers, and dancers. Harold Nicholas, along with his brother, Fayard, undoubtedly earned their coveted spots, and they truly delivered in their performance. When Stormy Weather was released on July 21st, 1943, Harold Nicholas was scoring tens in his professional life. By this time, he had been married to Dorothy Dandridge for almost a year, and at the time of Stormy Weather's debut, Dorothy Dandridge was pregnant with their first child. She gave birth to the child less than 3 weeks after the movie debuted. This seemed like it should have been a time for celebration in a young couple's life. But in truth, it was the total opposite. Carolyn Suzanne Nicholas was born on September 2nd, 1943, just 4 days before the couple's one-year anniversary, and their child's birth was the beginning of the end of their marriage. Carolyn Suzanne Nicholas was born to actress Dorothy Dandridge and her husband, Harold Nicholas, on September 2nd, 1943. Some might say that the child's birth happened on the right day, but at the wrong time, meaning too late. Apparently, on the day that Carolyn was born, the plan was that Harold would take Dorothy to the hospital for the delivery. A reasonable plan, especially because he had the couple's only car, and she would be in labor and clearly unable to drive. Dorothy Dandridge, as you may know, was one of the most sought-after women in the entertainment industry in her prime. No doubt that Harold Nicholas would have had to do some major wooing to get her attention when he met her while she was working as a chorus line dancer at the Cotton Club. It is highly likely that he was heavily wooing Dorothy when he and his brother performed this Chattanooga Choo-Choo song and dance routine with her the year before he married her. But the problem is that the wooing stopped after the couple said their I do's. Harold was known to desert his wife and cheat on her. He was inattentive of Dorothy, to say the least, and when she was in labor, he dropped her off at her sister-in-law's home while he went out to play golf. Dorothy was to wait for his return so that they could go to the hospital together, but when her pains became too intense, she and her sister-in-law left without Harold. They ended up having to take a neighbor's car to the hospital since Harold was out golfing. Labor and delivery was strenuous for Dorothy, and when those hours ended, their daughter, Carolyn, was born. Unfortunately for the baby girl and her parents, she was born with a type of brain damage called cerebral anoxia, a condition in which no oxygen reaches the brain. Dorothy seemed convinced that it was because of the baby's delayed birth that she suffered this condition. And that is a possibility. And for that reason, Dorothy Dandridge blamed her daughter's condition on the fact that her husband did not follow their plan to take her to the hospital when she went into labor. That being said, there is an inkling of a possibility that the baby's condition was caused by the use of forceps during her delivery. One thing is for certain. Had Harold placed priority in fatherhood over golfing on that day, his possible role or fault, depending on how you view the situation, would not even be in question. So you can imagine that no matter how good or bad the marriage was, it had to have been a very difficult point to pick up from, where the wife believes that the husband has caused brain damage in their only child. But that notion didn't start on the day of Carolyn's birth. At first, Dorothy didn't think that anything was wrong with Carolyn, but by the age of 2, the child was still not speaking. Dorothy took her to a doctor who confirmed that she was mentally disabled. The doctor advised Dorothy to give Carolyn up and have another child, but she refused. What a cruel time in medical history. The medical norms of that time were brutal, including the vocabulary. Carolyn was labeled as mentally retarded for all of her life. While Dorothy was dealing with facing the reality of her daughter's condition, Harold Nicholas was largely absent and having affairs throughout their marriage. By 1948, he had completely abandoned his family, leaving Dorothy to care for their child as though she were a single mother. So, in 1950, Dorothy finally filed for divorce after 8 years of marriage. Though the couple was divorced and living separately, it was very well understood that Dorothy would still need help with Carolyn's medical needs. But Harold refused to financially contribute to his daughter's care. Since that was his stance, Dorothy Dandridge, one of Hollywood's most sought-after women, really was a single mother in every way, as if the child had no father walking the face of the earth. Carolyn's disability required constant care, and expenses took their toll after Dorothy's divorce from her second husband, Jack Dennison, in 1962, left her in debt. And trust me when I say, her marriage to Jack was no better than her marriage to Harold Nicholas. She married beneath herself twice, and those marriages left her life in shambles. Dorothy Dandrige had to file for bankruptcy after her second divorce. She was forced to sell her Hollywood home and place her daughter in a state mental institution in Camarillo, California. Dorothy avoided speaking publicly about her daughter until 1963, when she appeared on Cleveland's The Mike Douglas Show. She was praised for bringing awareness to what was called mental retardation at that time. Dorothy said of her daughter, who was 20 years old then, quote, I never really thought I could give my daughter up to an institution. I guess the longest period of time that I have been away from her was about 6 months. Actually, she has no conception of time. She doesn't know how long I've been away. She doesn't even know I'm her mother. She only knows that she likes me and I like her, and she feels warmth and that I'm a nice person." End quote. Also, in her autobiography, Dorothy wrote about her struggles with her daughter in a heartbreaking manner. She wrote, quote, "She'd hug me tight, crushing into my breasts. I have known quite a few men since then, but I tell you, you cannot get that feeling from anything else in the world. Except this, I knew that to everyone else, she was hideous." End quote. Dorothy died at the age of 42 from a drug overdose on September 8, 1965. Whether it was accidental or intentional seems to remain unknown. Carolyn remained in the state's care, and the rest of her life seems to be a mystery. There is no confirmation of any family member beyond her mother ever visiting her. And if her reported date of death is correct, she outlived her biological father by 3 years. There are no official reports about her date of death, but the year is said to be 2003. Harold Nicholas died on July 3, 2000, and it is alleged that no relative ever claimed Carolyn's body. For so many, the name Dorothy Dandridge is synonymous with Carmen Jones. For her, that Carmen Jones role was the role of a lifetime, and the man who gave her the role, she was in the relationship of a lifetime with him, or so she thought. Dorothy had been in a horrible marriage with tap dancing superstar Harold Nicholas. She put up with his cheating, neglect, and abandonment of her and her daughter, Carolyn, until she just couldn't take it anymore. After Harold had already skipped out on his family, Dorothy finally filed for divorce. She was left with no one in the world except for her daughter, who, due to the barbaric times in medical history, was labeled as mentally retarded. The world was a cold, lonely place, and because of her financial situation, it was becoming a desperate place too. Dorothy hadn't been able to book the type of work that a performer of her caliber deserved, and her ex-husband, Harold Nicholas, flat out refused to financially support his daughter. So you can imagine that when she landed the role of Carmen Jones in Otto Preminger's musical of the same name, Dorothy must have felt like things were finally looking up, turning around in her favor. And to top it all off, she was in love with the man who was making it happen for her, Otto Preminger. But was he in love with her? He was quite probably in lust for her. Understandably so. She was a beautiful woman. But did she expect too much from this relationship? Well, long story short, they had a whirlwind 4-year love affair that started while working on Carmen Jones. The film earned Dorothy her first and only Oscar nomination ever. She must have felt like Otto was some type of good luck charm. So she listened to him. He gave her excellent career advice for a white woman. But Dorothy Dandridge wasn't white. She was a woman of color making films in a Jim Crow-era Hollywood. So Otto's tips for her that included only accept lead roles did far more damage to her career than help. Only accept lead roles. Think about it. Black actresses at that time were lucky to get work as supporting cast members. Times were changing, but not that quickly. Otto Preminger thought that everyone else saw Dorothy as he saw her. Well, maybe he wasn't that naive. He knew that everyone didn't see Dorothy exactly as he did, like his wife. He must have known that she didn't like Dorothy as much as he did. In all fairness, Dorothy probably knew that too. But that's not what made her relationship with Otto end. Dorothy Dandridge came up in that golden age of Hollywood, a time when the studios owned their actors and treated them like property. And Dorothy was treated no differently from other actresses in that regard. So, when Dorothy Dandridge and Otto Preminger were expecting a child from their affair, her studio put the kibosh on the child itself and forced Dorothy to have an abortion. Dorothy finally realized that she was never going to be able to climb up the ladder and make the move from mistress to wife. She wanted more than Otto was in a position to give her, so she moved on. Enter the rebound guy who she married, Jack Dennison. When Dorothy Dandridge was forced to abort Otto Preminger's baby in 1955, she not only terminated the pregnancy, she terminated her relationship with him as well. And while she was performing at the Riviera in Las Vegas, she met Jack Dennison and started a relationship with him. He let Dorothy know that he held interest in multiple casinos in Vegas. However, the truth was that he was just a maitre d' at the Riviera. But that didn't stop him from lying about it. He did everything that he could think of to keep up his act. He told Dorothy that he had a lot of money saved up and put away. He told Jet magazine that he had been the vice president of the Riviera. Yeah, the vice president of the busboys, maybe. Jack knew that he was the rebound guy, and he took full advantage of that. He knew that Dorothy's emotional state was not the best after her breakup with Otto, so he pushed his way into her life, posing as a sympathetic listening ear, a shoulder to cry on, a man to sweep her off of her feet and give her the life that she wanted. What she wanted was to be a wife, and all of the trappings that were supposed to come with that title: protection, provision, a steady home life, and the option to work rather than work being a necessity. One of the ways that Jack Dennison tried to gently push into Dorothy's life seems like a sweet romantic gesture, until you know the rest of the story. He sent flowers to her every single day while she was performing at the Riviera. This went on for an extended period of time, so I can imagine that if Dorothy wasn't swept off of her feet at this gesture alone, that she was at the very least flattered. She couldn't help but take notice of his wooing attempt. That was a rather expensive one. It likely led her to believe that he had a lot of money to burn. And, well, nothing could have been further from the truth. Maybe it was just the daily flowers that were delivered to her, or a combination of things. But whatever the reason or reasons, Dorothy went ahead and entered into a romantic relationship with Jack. Whether it was that she wanted privacy regarding her personal life, or she was doubting this relationship, Dorothy kept very quiet about it. She didn't talk to the press about Jack Dennison, but as soon as he got the green light to speak on it, he did. In this February 1959 article of Jet magazine, she said, quote, "You know, you just can't talk about love like this. I don't want to talk about it because marriage is the logical conclusion of love, and I haven't made up my mind about marriage yet." End quote. By contrast, this is what Jack told Jet magazine, quote, "I knew she was the greatest actress and the most beautiful woman in the world when I saw her in Carmen Jones in 1954. Then, in November of that year, she came to the Riviera in Las Vegas, where I was vice president. I was completely smitten when I saw her nightclub act and fell in love with her instantaneously the first time I talked to her. But it took me 6 months to convince her that I loved her and wasn't just another stage door Johnny. I knew this was the woman I wanted to marry. I was married once when I was 21, but there was no understanding. Maybe because the girl wasn't Dorothy. I don't think of Dorothy as a Negro, but as a woman I love very much. I only hope if she marries me, her race will accept me. Not that I believe it would make any difference to Dorothy, because she's a wonderful woman, but one of the reasons I bought this club was so that if she ever said yes, we would not have to worry for our security or what other people thought about us. You see, I am a man, and I would definitely want her to quit her career if we married. I believe that the value she would receive in having a husband and devoted lover would more than compensate for what she would lose by giving up show business." End quote. Well, not only did he like to talk a lot, he liked to lie a lot. Let's unpack the lies to Jet Magazine. He said he had been the vice president of the Riviera when Dorothy came to work there. And we know that the highest position he ever held was maitre d'. He also claimed that he bought his nightclub so that he could provide Dorothy with financial security. The truth was that Dorothy sank a lot of her money into his club, 6 figures, which was a lot in the 1950s. He also said that he would want her to quit her career if they got married, because his value to her as a husband would outweigh her compensation from show business. Now, I can't say that his wanting her to quit work was a lie, but I can say that that's not at all how their relationship worked out in the end. Dorothy Dandridge was the main breadwinner. When it gets down to it, she was the only breadwinner in their marriage. Let me know, do you think that Dorothy went out of her way to keep up appearances in this relationship with Jack Dennison because she had already had a failed relationship with a black bum, and now she didn't want to admit that she had attached herself to a white bum? Also, do you think that Jack Dennison married Dorothy Dandridge only for her money and fame? Let's get a discussion going. Now, let's back things up a bit and talk about their wedding day. They were married in the ancient Greek rite ceremony at Los Angeles Sophia Orthodox Cathedral, and 200 people attended. Among those guests was Nat King Cole, who brought his wife as his +1. He was the only major celebrity in attendance. Outside of Nat King Cole's presence, everything about this wedding was plain and ordinary. The kind of wedding that you would expect for an everyday working-class couple. Not a movie star and the club owner who has several profitable investments. Her dress, his suit, the 30-minute ceremony, the reception, or lack thereof, and the honeymoon. All very ordinary. After the wedding, there was no limousine waiting to whisk the couple away down the road of eternal wedded bliss. No. Jack drove them to their reception that wasn't a reception at all. There was no party for their guests, just a dinner for two at a restaurant on their way to the airport. But at least they got to have champagne. Not so fun fact about the wedding. Dorothy was attended by her good friend, Jerry Branton, who stated that Dorothy had to sedate herself to get through the wedding, and she fell asleep at the dinner afterwards. Their wedding should have been the first sign to Dorothy that she would not be living a life of luxury with her second husband. Now, let's get to this honeymoon, because the marriage literally goes downhill from this point. Perhaps the term honeymoon should be viewed as loosely as wedding reception in this story. In actuality, the honeymoon was more of a working vacation for Dorothy Dandridge. The destination was New York City. After their arrival, Dorothy would have to get herself ready for the movie premiere of Porgy and Bess, a film that was directed by the man whose child she had to abort before she started seeing the man who was now her husband. But, like a professional, Dorothy did her work at the premiere. She smiled, posed for photos, and signed autographs. Then came the end to all of the illusions and lies. Jack finally told Dorothy the truth about who he really was and what he really had, now that she was bound to him legally. Jack used their honeymoon as the perfect opportunity to tell Dorothy that he was, in fact, broke. And, despite all of the money that she had just invested into his new restaurant, he would go under if she didn't give him more money, and that he needed her to start performing at his restaurant as soon as possible. Talk about a short honeymoon phase. Is it just me, or does knowing this make his smiles in their wedding photos seem evil? Just a brief glance at his billboard versus the insides of his matchbooks gives you an idea of how little he knew about business. His billboard says that his restaurant is the finest eating establishment in the world. Yet his matchbook tells people to come as you are. That's not what you do for fine dining. So, all of the talk to Jet magazine about not wanting Dorothy to work because he would provide for her was just lies. This guy didn't specialize in ribs, he specialized in fibs. Marriage was supposed to provide financial and emotional stability for Dorothy, but this man wanted to take her money and force her to work in order to cover his debts. And she did it. She started singing at his dinner club, and unfortunately for Dorothy, her name wasn't a draw. That move ended up hurting her ego, her pocketbook, and her reputation in the entertainment industry. Jack's restaurant ended up going under less than a year after they got married. He had to sell the restaurant that bore his name, which I'm sure came as a surprise to nobody. All of that talk that he gave to Jet magazine in 1959 about Dorothy only having to work if she wanted to because he was a provider went out of the door by 1960. When he talked to Jet about having to sell his restaurant, this clown said that his next move was going to be selling ballpoint pens that light up when used. Around this time, Dorothy's dependence on pills and alcohol increased. Imagine that. The debt that he created had given her the worst wedding gift, a husband who needed financial support. On top of being a liar and broke, this loser had the nerve to be abusive to Dorothy, verbally and physically, according to her petition for divorce, which she finally filed in 1962. And it was finally in 1962, after Dorothy filed for divorce, that Jack came clean to the press about his inability to financially provide for his wife. He told Jet magazine, quote, "After all, the average family can live on $700, $800, or $900 a month, but our living standard was in the $2,000 a month bracket. I couldn't make enough here to tell my wife she didn't have to work. The old man has got to be a breadwinner in a marriage." End quote. In her divorce documents, Dorothy accused Jack of extreme cruelty, claiming he struck her on many occasions. During her marriage to him, she started to drink heavily and abuse prescription drugs. Dorothy's marriage to Jack was the beginning of the end of everything that was good to her. In that short marriage, she began to lose her physical health, her mental health, her money, and even her fame. With every month that passed, she became less and less successful in her career because her only standing gig was singing at his third-rate supper club. Hollywood wasn't taking Dorothy Dandridge seriously anymore. It's too bad that she didn't have the foresight to file for divorce sooner, because being with Jack got her deeper into debt as each month went by. It was great that she filed for divorce, but by the time that she did, the irreparable damage had already been done to her finances. Jack's out-of-control spending and bad investments started a snowball from which Dorothy would never be able to recover. I won't go over all of the dollar figures in this sad story, but to put the amount of money she had lost for being attached to this loser into perspective, consider this. When she married him in 1959, she was earning $250,000 a year. That has a buying power of $2.4 million in 2022. She had put a great deal of her savings into his restaurant, which quickly failed. That was a 6-figure investment for her that yielded absolutely no return. Now, this part isn't entirely on Jack, but his total lack of income certainly didn't help. The IRS claimed that Dorothy owed back taxes. Then, after falling too far behind on her mortgage payments, her home was in foreclosure. Less than a year after her divorce was finalized, Dorothy Dandridge had to file for bankruptcy. But that wasn't the end. The very next day after bankruptcy court, Helen Calhoun, the woman who had been taking care of Dorothy's special needs child from her first marriage, informed her that her daughter would be returned to her. Dorothy had just missed 2 consecutive payments for her daughter's care. Carolyn, Dorothy's daughter, who was now 19 and ruled a physical danger to herself and others, would be dropped off at Dorothy's house. This left Miss Dandridge, who had previously vowed that her daughter would never be put in a state institution, to have to break that vow. She was out of money and out of options, and Harold Nicholas, who had never paid a dime for his daughter's care from day one, didn't have a change of heart by the time that this desperate situation came upon them. Dorothy Dandridge's bad choices in men made for a dark ending to what should have been a brilliant life the whole way through. My sources for this story are Vanity Fair, Tragedy and Triumph, The Dorothy Dandridge Story, Everything and Nothing, The Dorothy Dandridge Tragedy by Dorothy Dandridge and Earl Conrad, Eclectic Vibes, Twix and Mix on Tumblr, Ebony Magazine Archives, 1966, History Collection, Vanguard of Hollywood, Jet Magazine Archives, 1959, Jet Magazine Archives, 1960, Jet Magazine Archives, 1962, and Ebony Magazine Archives, 1966.